Hi guys, and welcome back to the next episode of Don't Fear the Weight. With me, your not so tiny Titan. I have been given that wonderful title by my very, very, very good friend, Mr. Nick Gloff, who is in the opposite seat with me today. Hello, good sir. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, I'm not so tiny anymore, apparently.
Yeah. We've officially made the title change. Now the branding just changed too.
That's it. So we've got to put them on t-shirts and everything like that and get some more logos and more apparel that I said that I've got to send over to you. And you're obviously a lot larger than Not So Tiny. So.
Just put the not so right off the side of the normal logo and then just like put some underlines on it looking like you just wrote on the t-shirt. Yeah. That should be the way that it should go. And then as we continue to move forward, when it makes it to medium Titan, do the same thing. Just keep the same t-shirt. Do a circle around it, a cross on it, and then just put medium over top.
That's amazing.
So you can continue to see all of the next titles stacking over one another.
Do you know what? That's such a good idea. I think I'm going to do that.
There you go.
I've got a guy called Chris from Rawtality who does like all of my logos and printing and stuff. So I'm actually going to tag him in this YouTube and just like say that first 30 seconds of this is all about his next job.
Sweet.
So he can
I'm looking forward to getting that in the mail.
I know, right? It's going to have to go across. Oh, dear. Right. Well, now all of that fancy stuff has gone out of the way. Let's have a little bit of an update from you, Nick, because it's been a while since we've had a little bit of a podcast together. So what's going on in your side of the world?
Yeah. How long has it been now since we did the recording?
Well, it's got to be, I don't know, because I speak to you like almost every day. So probably about 3 months or so, 3-4 months.
Wow. That's been a while.
Mm.
Okay, so an update from the last 3 or 4 months or so is I am out of a dieting phase.
Amazing.
So I was going through a prep and then had to cut that short because I had some health issues that pulled me out of being able to finish it. And even if I did continue to press through, wouldn't have shown up with a look that would have been presentable just because of the issues that were going on. So now that that's out of the way, done a little bit of a reverse and now into a off-season phase. Mm-hmm. And strength is coming back, which is the main thing we're going to be talking about today.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, the fun stuff. So strength is coming back, training performance is starting to come back, where after dieting since March. And so I started early, and normally my capacity stays pretty high throughout a diet, and I don't have to worry too much about having drop-offs, but it hit late June-ish. And things started to take a little bit more of a declined run off of where the performance could go, especially with my normal axially loaded lifts. Everything else pretty much stayed as they were. But the things that I take the most pride in, the things that make me enjoy my training the most were the things I had to let go. You know, if you love them, let them go type deal.
Yeah.
So as if I didn't let them go, it was just going to make me very angry with them. So I had to just part ways for a little bit, but I'm now back.
Good.
With all of those fun parts of my training that I can do again, and things are going pretty well. Aside from everything else, business is good. People are happy. Working with Luke Miller a little bit more closely with some seminars. Luke and John. We have another one on the 24th in San Antonio, Texas. If anyone is on this side of the ocean that wants to go and see that. Unless, of course, you're that ambitious and you want to jump all the way over here for that. It'd be awesome.
I would love to come to Texas. I would really love to come to Texas, but I haven't had the formal invitation yet. So I'm waiting for that.
You have the formal invitation. You are welcome.
I've got it now. Okay, great.
October 24th. You can be there. I would hope to see you.
That would be cool. I would have to stay for Thanksgiving, though.
Yeah.
That would be a good thing.
All the way to Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
It's a bit of time.
It is a bit of time, but you know, you've got to have a Thanksgiving. To be fair, I was supposed to put this on my Instagram and I didn't for some unknown reason. So I've got half of my family is American on my dad's side. Okay. And I got a phone call from my uncle last night, really late at night, saying, guess what? We're coming to the UK and we're going to have a Thanksgiving on the 24th of October. I was like, dude, I am there. Nice. We're having yam pie and like, you know, the sweet potato with the marshmallows on top and stuff. Yep. Oh, I can't wait. I really can't wait. So, it's going to be great. So, but that's the same day as the seminar. So
that is the same day as the seminar.
So that sucks.
Yeah, right on the dot.
I know, that sucks. I just remembered that. But yeah, sorry, I really interrupted because I got excited about sweet potato pie.
Oh, no, that's totally fine. I understand. It's hard not to get excited about that.
I know. So seminars with Luke and John.
Yep, seminars are kicking off. We still have more coming. And then, you know, still doing my work with Team Camp Jansen, doing stuff here in Stuart, Florida, over at Revive. So everything is business as usual right now. So not too much to report aside from that.
Very cool. And in terms of your health then, obviously we won't go into too much detail about what declined, but is that now on the up and up? And what have you done to kind of rectify those? Did you look at bloods and obviously checking with Matt and things like that?
So just to give a basic on it, what ended up happening was that about 6 weeks out, I started putting on a ton of water. And so the water that was getting put on is not like you had a really big leg day and you have like a 3 to 5 pound gain. And then you're like, well, I don't look that good, but you know, it's whatever. And you keep going. Over the course of a week, I put on about 10 pounds of water. And over the course of 2, I put on about 20. And then it wouldn't go away after that point.
Okay.
And that was with diet manipulations, taking anything out that was going to be a problem for digestion. Pulled that card, didn't make much of a change, pulled out some foods that are more likely to give some sort of a trigger for somebody that is celiac or like any sort of food intolerances whatsoever. Made those pulls, try to change those out, elimination type diet. That didn't really help either. We thought it was a possible compounds issue. Pulled all the compounds out, everything, top to bottom, not even TRT was in.
Wow.
That didn't change anything. Even after the elapsed time that you would have to expect that everything had to have cleared by that point, no changes. All stimulants were reduced drastically. All the extracurriculars that you would use in a prep as a stimulant of any kind was pulled. Then moderate caffeine stayed in after about 2 weeks of trying completely without. That also didn't make much of a change. Sleep timing changes were applied. Some supplement changes, trying to use anything that would help as a mild diuretic effect to try and help pull and drag a little bit more water out without going the route of using a pharmaceutical type.
Sure.
And just going all the way in on it. And that full deloading, taking long times away from training completely. I went 2 separate periods of a full week of not training. And then when I did reintroduce, I had a 1 on, 2 off, 1 on, 2 off type cycle. And then I moved to a 1 on, 1 off. And it really didn't make any changes either. And up to now, the symptoms that I was getting of having that type of water retention, being like not just the water being there and having, it got to the point where obviously you have 20 pounds of water on you. Imagine for anybody that is listening to this, that is longtime powerlifter or bodybuilder, somebody that gets all the way down to stage or competition, like they do a water cut to get onto the platform, or they go all the way in and get shredded for their show, and then they just eat and drink everything possible in sight for like 4 days. Yeah. And then you have them walking around like, you know, like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man for the next like week until everything clears off. And you got like the walking upstairs, like your heart feels like it's going to come out of your ears type thing. And you're purple all the time, all that type of stuff. Where it's an extreme event that brought it there. That was what I was dealing with for multiple weeks on end. Yeah, I know. And so up to this point, those symptoms have pretty much gone away completely. Okay. But the water retention is still pretty heavy. And so still trying to figure out exactly what it is that needs to be done to try and get it all completely off and get it like to stay away. But it's at least to the point where I'm not having as many normal everyday physical symptoms, and the training is getting better. So at least I know that my health is at least in a good enough place that I can continue to do well there. And things are going to start turning around at least a little bit in some aspects, even if it's not completely. That's kind of where that's at.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose this is just a very big word of warning to everybody, guys, that even though your prep seems to be going absolutely fine, all of a sudden shit happens.
Yeah.
And things that you do not know are going to happen that you can't preempt either. So one of those the unexpected things.
This is the second time this has happened. So this happened on my first prep too. So, and it happened in the same way, and it took a couple of months for everything to get resolved. And so And really all that resolved it was time.
Sure.
So I don't know what that is exactly telling me. I've gone over and with a couple of other people that I've had in on all the help to keep me monitoring and figuring out what the next step could be, and where all of the symptoms and signs and everything was leading towards as a possible cause. It looks as if it's a possible autoimmune problem.
I was going to suggest maybe it was something to do with autoimmune. Just when you get that to that lower levels of body fat and your cortisol rises too high, it's almost like that reaction, isn't it?
Yep. So it seems like all signs point there, but I don't have any confirmation on that quite yet. So that's kind of where the assumption is right now. And with the blood work, because you brought that up, I was monitoring blood work throughout this, especially at the peak of when it was the worst.
Sure.
And to my surprise, when I did get my blood work done, I was expecting it to be a complete dumpster fire. And it came back and it was clean. Like, it wasn't just clean for a bodybuilder where we expect an elevation on all the liver enzymes, cholesterol's a little bit off, especially in prep,
Sure.
and having all the other stuff in. And then, normal kidney values were going to be up and all changed and shifted. It wasn't even bodybuilder okay blood work. It was good blood work. It's like, and C-reactive protein and everything that would be a cross indicator for kidney and heart, which would be the other main thing, would be kidneys directly over whatever it is that the changes have been. And then heart, because the heart would be what would lead to all of the extreme edema that was going on. Like, to that degree, you would expect that there would be a heart problem as well. But if there was a heart problem, you would see quite an elevation, especially in like things like C-reactive protein and things like that.
Yeah, for sure.
And creatine kinase and all the rest, but it wasn't. And so that left another head scratcher on the whole situation, to lead me to believe that it has less to do with actual damages done, but more so an internal response to something, like an allergic reaction or an autoimmune problem. So that's kind of where I'm looking at this point. Really,
really weird.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Oh, well, it's more medical tests and more testing and more. Well, let's just get a barbell on your back and get stronger, and then you'll feel better.
Yeah, pretty much for right now is the game plan, is to continue to try and figure out what's up. But for the moment, focusing more on just trying to keep everything together and keeping, the ship moving in one direction. And as long as I can continue to move in one direction and not incur any other sorts of health issues along the way, then if it follows the same trend as the last time it did, then it's just going to continue to improve on itself and get better over time. And if it just continues to get better over time, then I know that for the next prep that goes through, to finally get through it, extend it a little bit longer and try and take a much less aggressive approach with how I'm making the changes. So not as big of calorie reductions all at once and being paired with activity changes all at once, doing things pretty quickly to try and meet a deadline, because that was really what I was trying to do. I was trying to meet a deadline that wasn't going to be easy to reach. And so having to pull things extra, that goes to the point of the autoimmune issue, because cortisol was like way up, because I was having to really, really push it. And so having to push it like that, something's going to break at some point. Something did. And that something ended up kind of ending the probability of it going well any further than that point, obviously. So,
yeah. Well, bottom line is, it's, have you heard of the Goldman's dilemma?
No.
Okay. So it was something that was really, really fascinating to me, because it was like, how far do you actually push it for the end result? And the Goldman's dilemma was, it was a study that was done where scientists actually asked Olympic people, or all the athletes in the Olympics, if you would do anything that you could to get that gold medal, but it would reduce your lifespan by 10 years, would you do it? And you know what? 100% of the applicants said yes. Now, it's absolutely crazy, because realistically, what are you going to get at the end of that bodybuilding prep that you have pushed your body to such an extreme level that you could have possibly taken a whole boatload of medical drugs to get that water retention off and push you to that end result? But for what attainability? What are you going to get?
Yeah.
you're going to get a little accolade, you're going to get a pat on the back, a shake of the hands, and you're going to get a little trophy. And then you're going to go back to work the next day.
Yeah. And then have to deal with a bigger issue off the back end.
Exactly. Is it worth your health? Is it worth it? So
no.
You've done, you made a good decision. You made a grown-up decision. I always call it a grown-up, and I don't mean that in any kind of like detrimental way at all. but
don't worry about it.
I'm an old fart, so it's fine. I can call everybody. Okay. but no, it's true. It's like sometimes you can push the boundaries. Sometimes we want to do things because we're so into it, we're so passionate about it. But every now and again, we have to say, do you know what? Let's just pull back. Let's just say no. So I'm glad that you did that, because you're now healthy and alive.
Yes.
So, which is because friends. Okay, anyway, moving swiftly, moving on from that one and all the like the soppy shit that we do. Right. So we were going to talk about strength phases in bodybuilding, the enjoyment in strength. You know that I coach some high level strongmen and women and powerlifters, and we were just having a bit of a chinwag about it. So we thought, hey, fuck it, why don't we just podcast it? So let's talk about a strength phase in bodybuilding and how you would actually run in terms of programming it, because you are one strong mofo. I mean, I've never seen anybody kind of do a front squat with like, I don't know, you had like 900 plates aside or something. So you were front squat in the world at one point. So let's talk about the certain phases. Shall we talk about it as you were coming out of prep? Because I'm assuming that you just didn't go straight into a strength phase out of prep.
Yeah, sure. We can talk about what I did. So this time through, obviously, like I said, having the normal things that I would have in my programming, being the normal, like big three modified ish, because I don't really do a conventional deadlift by standard, a conventional deadlift, not very often. I've had it in a very, very small number of times that I could fit on one hand over the last like 5 years.
Okay.
And so it's usually a variation of that, where the base variation for me would be just a barbell RDL. Then back squat would just be absolutely as it was. Then I also have that in with the front squat as another strength movement, as you mentioned. And then for pressing, I typically wouldn't go with the flat bench. I've put that in from time to time, but every time that I've put that back in, I've noticed that it's a little bit less fitting for the goal of where I am at. And so changing that out for something that's a little bit more likely to be helpful, being a bit of a lower incline press, is pretty much the base pattern for me as a strength movement. So, but with all of those things being what they are, I couldn't put all of those things that had to be removed when I was getting into a further and further fatigued state throughout the prep, and just drop them all back in with a singular program changing and just go, yep, here we are, time to go.
Yeah,
because that's not how that was going to work. If I tried to do that, then the problem that I would have ran into immediately would have been way overloading the system. And then everything I would have tried to do maybe would have had one good week, and then everything would have just taken a dive right after that. And then nothing would have been sustained.
Yeah.
And so to avoid that, for a strength phase of anyone trying to push into one, especially as a periodization over a year for a bodybuilder, a strength phase is never, in my opinion, to be a pure strength phase. For a bodybuilder, it doesn't make any sense. If we're going for a pure and only strength stimulus for whatever big target lifts that we have going on in the program, that's all you're going to get.
Yeah.
If you're going for pure strength adaptation, you're going to have a little bit of hypertrophy going on just as a result of increasing loads and doing more volumes of them. But beyond that, as it being more of an incidental hypertrophy, you don't get nearly as much of the actual hypertrophy benefit that you would be wanting to get through that strength phase of you moving higher loads, getting it to transfer what our actual goal by the end of the year would be, is having more tissue on.
Yeah.
And so always framing a strength phase for a bodybuilder and somebody that competes solely in bodybuilding and not as a power lifter and bodybuilder, because that distinction will change whether, like, how the programming looks anyway. To start with, the exercise selection itself will be different between those two examples, and then how you're going to periodize and phase everything and how far of a shift at any one period of time you have towards the hypertrophy or the strength realm. And so that will sit across all the main movements and all the accessory movements, how you order them in a session, how you stack them across days of the week, things like that. And so making the distinction between what is being competed on for what reason is major, and that goes first.
Yeah.
Me, as my example, I don't compete in powerlifting. as much as people would keep on telling me that I should and that they want me to. So I don't, and so I don't have to focus any of my time on trying to perfect the exact execution of the movements that would be done on a platform for powerlifting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to do a competition style flat bench. I don't have to do a conventional deadlift. I don't have to do a normal raw back squat. Although that is the only one of the three that I do.
Yeah.
So I can make that choice because I don't need to have all the other ones moving up as the main targets so that I can present them on the platform later on.
Mm-hmm.
I am using those movements as a conduit within my programming for me to leverage my ability to get stronger. So that ability to get stronger is being utilized so I can spread that ability across the rest of my work. That raises the total output over everything that's done with those base patterns and those muscles that do them so that everything can go up.
Yeah.
So what I did is slow introductions over, to start with, the movements that I can do most regularly that are high output, but I am well leveraged to do and well skilled at. So the first change that I made was to start with bringing all volumes over the program that I was doing during the prep while I was in a fatigue state, keeping that at base volume.
Yeah.
So not throwing anything else in, no intensifiers on sets, no extra anything, just keeping it at base and watching all of my numbers for every single volume target that I had within every exercise to start creeping its way back up, and me being able to leave sessions without me feeling like I'm dead.
Sure.
Once working with the ability to walk in and out of the gym session without feeling like I'm crushed, and I have the capacity to continue to make higher performance gains week on week, at that point, I know I'm working with a progressive value of how much I can do. And at that point, once I have that progressive value to work with, and I have that resource and that reserve of progressive and recovery capacity, that is the time that I can make an adjustment and put in something that will take up a larger amount of that reserve.
Mm-hmm.
Which would be, for me, back squat.
Okay.
So that is the movement that works the best for me. I am pretty well leveraged and pretty well skilled at it at this point. And so that is the easiest one for me to put in and have very little collateral detriment to over the rest of my week.
Yeah.
Even though it is my highest loaded movement, even barring hinges. And so it is my highest loaded movement, but because I am so well leveraged for it and how well I've trained the skill, it doesn't take that much impact out of me.
I've noticed as well that you can do a lot of lower back loading and recover from that lower back loading just from, obviously talking to you and just watching your stories. It's like you can do a back squat and then you can do a heavy loaded RDL the very next day and not have any issues.
Yep. I've always been that way. And so I also have that ability, which a lot of people do not. So that is something to consider as well. So at any point that we're talking about me as an example may not always be the best indicator for what can be done. So this isn't a template. This is, to be totally up front with that. Anybody that's listening, this is not a template directly to follow based off of the final decisions that I was making, but more so over the thought process of how to make those choices.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So thumbs up on that one.
Thumbs up on that one.
Yeah. So yes, I can handle a lot of lower back loading and do it consecutively. I can stack sessions over the week with a back squat on one day, the next day come in and do a heavy RDL or a bent over row, and then do a heavy loaded free press the day after, or have the next day as a rest day, and then moving on to the next session being a free press, and then going back into another free squat again. Usually not the same one, so I wouldn't do the same back squat twice.
No.
But I would put in usually a front squat if I'm doing a true strength cycle by then, and still be able to continually get output across the week doing it that way.
Right. Got you.
And so not all people, and I would say most people, can't stack that many, especially past a certain progression. I won't ever at this point, I mean, especially right now, I would not call myself an advanced trainee. I would call myself intermediate for the actual benchmarks that I have made, and especially my physique development. So going from that point, which is really the lens that I need to look at all of my programming through, is that being an intermediate with a higher ability to make strength movements work for me, and being able to really like lean into the ability to get strong pretty quick, and my ability to take a lot of chronic axial loading. I have those advantages that would make you possibly think that was an advanced trait, but really it would be the opposite.
Yeah.
That is not an advanced trait. People in advanced training states, being that they've done it for long periods of time, they get to that point that they can do that and do those, the amount of load that they could do at their maximum, at their height.
Yeah.
They usually have to take everything else and make it a far step back if they're focusing on any one lift and giving it the output parameters that would be needed for them to hit it at the highest load for the highest volumes. I don't need to do that. And so as far as that's concerned, I'm like early and intermediate or beginner as far as like how much I can stack on so much volume on those axially loaded lifts. Like if we were to take the programming for a rank beginner.
Yeah.
Beginner.
Yeah.
You're pretty much, the program is going to look like as high a frequency as possible of doing the big lifts.
Sure.
Because they can tolerate it, because the amount of load that they're moving, the actual absolute load that they're moving, compared to the relative ability that they have to move load at some point, because they're usually at a very low percentage of their actualized potential for their strength, even at that moment. They have the ability to do that a lot, and they can recover from it because it's nowhere near what their maximum capacities are. And it's not anywhere near what the actual tolerance of the tissues they're training or the tissues they're loading, not being muscle, are able to tolerate. And so they can continue to do that. I have that type of the ability to continue to do those axially loaded lifts on a consistent basis and do them fairly proficiently throughout the entire week without much of a performance decrement because of that. And so that leans me over to that end, as well as all of the way that I have to stack structure in my own sessions and across the week. Volume is pretty well distributed across everything pretty evenly, because that's where I'm at. Because my goal and where I am, I have a lot of tissue to put on everywhere.
Yeah.
And there's really not one place that needs a more emphasis than another one. So it just continues to be that. And so as far as the programming goes for me, I sit in the intermediate realm.
Yeah. Interesting. Very cool.
Yeah.
So would you actually say then, obviously we're talking bodybuilders, and I'm trying to get my head away from strongman and powerlifting, because obviously they're using all of the barbell movements at the same time. Would you say then that you could actually use a strength element, but on a bodybuilding style exercise? So say, for example, let's use the squat. Can you use that on a pendulum or a hack?
Somewhat. Somewhat, but not in the pure sense that somebody coming at it from a pure strength realm would see it.
Sure.
So somebody from a pure strength realm would go, okay, I'm not going to do 5 sets of 3 on a hack squat. Like, no, you're right. You wouldn't, because it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to do that. But to sit more on the side of, are we going to set a high rep target and then only exist within that high rep target and treat it as such? Being as in the hypertrophy realm, that's pretty much how you would walk with it. You wouldn't have any sort of a goal of trying to push up maximum loads for a moderate rep target and then try to continually push up load and match reps up until the point that you have to stop because you don't have another rep in you, and then try to progress up in a rep target through there, which is the way that I would conceptualize how you would take a little bit of a strength approach to the volume and the way that you set up the volume versus load for a movement, which isn't pure strength, but it's going to lead you towards gaining more strength as an adaptation so that you can weaponize that, so to speak, as the weapon for you to use for the hypertrophy later. Yeah. And so setting up on a movement that's more so hypertrophy related, not so much just base pattern as a powerlifter or strongman, you modulate whatever you're doing with that specific movement to sit within a range that is going to be tolerable for you to do and make sense for the advantages and disadvantages of the exercise you're doing, where, make that an example, again, a hack squat, you're at such an extreme need for just pure torque at the knee to actually get you through the movement. That is a vulnerability of the movement. That is the major advantage of it, is that the highest torque is directly at the knee.
Yeah.
That's the point, because that is going to make it a super quad dominated movement, which is the purpose of us using it.
Sure.
And that's the purpose of people deciding to use a hack rather than just a barbell squat for hypertrophy purposes. Because of that advantage, it's also the disadvantage. The advantage, and thus, as you're doing bodybuilding, with that movement, you're going to push the rep target higher. The reason the rep target is higher is because that advantage of it being extremely knee dominant, having extremely high torques present at the knee, you're not going to be very well advantaged to leverage much of anything else to help you through that rep. Any of them. And so you getting extremely disadvantaged to use anything else, having the advantage on a singular muscle group, aside from other things holding you together, and some secondary help from like the adductors and, you know, adductors and glutes that are going to help you regardless of what you do with the knee angle. With all of that going for you, you're not going to be able to do a single, a double, or a triple with a hack squat and make it make much sense. And so the type of exercise like that, and most exercises based purely off of the hypertrophy benefit, are going to be not very good options for you to push the actual target for your reps that low. And so you don't.
Sure.
But you have the other base patterns that you can utilize sitting within those rep targets that you wouldn't necessarily do for hypertrophy benefit, that has a crossover effect onto those other movements. So all of the other movements that we do, even talking to a pure bodybuilder that does pretty much everything on a machine, your thought process being machines are better than free movements. Not really, because every single machine that you do is just a isolated derivative of a movement type for a single muscle group.
Yeah.
That's really all a machine is. And so if a machine is well done, it will give you specific advantages over some free weight movements, because it does isolate things off better and it gives you better curves and things to align with. And so the actual specific demand over one muscle tissue is going to be exacerbated over what it would be on a free movement, but it is just a derivative of a free movement. And if it's a derivative of a free movement, you get better at that base free movement and you get stronger at it. You can express that strength across all rep targets once you get onto that more isolated version of it on a machine.
Yeah.
And that would be the approach. That's the overall concept of what I would think about for a strength phase for a bodybuilder. You use and leverage specific movements that are going to be better suited to sitting within the strength realm that aren't so well suited for a higher volume target. Utilize what it's best for, and then utilizing what that is best for will leverage your ability to get stronger over the base pattern, which you can express across all the rest of the work in more derivative patterns thereof.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yep. And over time, changing what the emphasis of where your volume is over the course of the week and what patterns get it is going to change whether or not you can express higher amounts of that strength capacity on the movements following it that are derivative of it or not.
Yeah.
And so trying to undulate that over the period of a year is going to allow you to, and this is the way that I think about programming for myself, if you're somebody that has a more restricted reserve in ability on how much performance and recovery you have using those bigger movements, axial loading totals are a lower ceiling for you, then this makes it a much easier example to conceptualize. You can only push up on one of those base patterns at a time in that extreme example. And so everything else sits in its more derivative form. So you would have your normal hypertrophy based movements with maybe a variation of a base pattern that is less heavily loaded. So if you're doing a squat is what you're trying to push up.
Yeah.
If your squat is what you're trying to push up is your strength movement, then everything that follows that is going to be your hack squat, your leg press, really even more isolated forms of hinging can be affected as well because of the crossover into the hamstring and the glutes, the whole posterior chain.
Yeah.
And then everything that's direct off of the strength of those lower body muscle groups, lunges, leg extensions, and the like.
Yeah.
So if you're pushing up on squats, you're not going to be able to do that same thing with a base pattern, pushing on strength with a hinge. You're not going to be able to do it necessarily with your pressing either. You're not going to be able to do it with another hinge type, but a row or an overhead press.
Yeah.
They're really the ones that we're going to look at the most often for trying to periodize across a double rotated session structure.
Yeah.
So you'll push on one, the rest of it will sit in its more derivative form because you only have a reserve that will work for one.
Yeah, for sure.
Focus on the strength of one more than everything else. And as long as you have that recovery capacity for being in an off-season setting and having that reserve, you're going to be able to make strength progressions across the board regardless. Because you can push up your strength in the hypertrophy ranges on the rest of the sessions of the week, as you would expect to be doing in that type of environment. But then you can make a much larger jump in what you're able to do in a specific muscle group or specific pattern involved muscle groups that you would get from one of those movements. And that will make bigger leaps much faster.
Yeah.
And then you rotate them based on priority and what is going to be emphasized into being able to be used following the first later on as the year goes on. And so for the way I would think about the programming, I wouldn't do for most bodybuilders, especially people that have come to me most often, I don't focus on purely hypertrophy as the only thing that we're looking to do. Typically, the programming is going to sit within this realm where there is a strength component to everything across the board going through the year. If you're always going to have the reserve of the ability to push up on your strength capacity in a pure sense, use it.
Yeah, for sure.
There's only so much of a progression you can make within the normal hypertrophy ranges for exercises. It's a long, slow grind. It is. But there's also the potential that you're not using of being able to push up on your pure strength within these strength ranges. And if you're pushing up on that and doing almost like a concurrent style of training through implementing both of them at the same time, you're not really taking a big detriment to either one of them as long as you balance them.
Yeah.
And so at no point, I mean, this thinking in a longer term sense, over a couple of months, you may not notice that there's much of a benefit to you directly. Over a year, what happens when all of your work on all of your, I'll keep going with lower body as an example. If all of your lower body work is in a machine type setting, you're doing a leg press or a hack squat for all of your squat-like derived movement. You stay in a rep target that makes more sense for them, being typically 8 reps plus.
Yeah.
You're for sure going to make progressions. For sure. But if you think over the period of a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, if you have no dedicated period of time or an undulation in what you're doing with those rep targets and how you're actually setting off your intensity for those movements, and you're sitting within that range constantly, you can make small incremental changes, but you never have a leap.
Yeah.
Your leap is going to be dictated by your external factors like drugs, sleep, food, the recovery things, the things that make you prepared for your training that allow you to recover so you can come back better.
Sure.
But you're not really using any of your latent ability that you already have present. Because you already have that ability, you're just not going into a context that makes you able to access it and apply it. Over a 4-year, 5-year period, you're going to be much, much stronger by the end of that 5-year period, utilizing heavier loads for all of your base patterns. And if we're looking at progressions in the same rep targets over and over and over periods of years, is what's going to be the easiest thing for us to track and put a correlation between the amount of tissue you gained and the amount of progress made in the gym. That tie is pretty tight. You start pushing on your base absolute strength, and you have that as a pretty regular push in a cycle over years and years and years and years. By the end of those years, you're going to be lifting so much more load for the same patterns, for the same execution you would have been anyway, because of the fact that you tapped into the latent ability that you wouldn't have and started to apply it, and you started using that general adaptation of strength, and it crossed over into all the rest of your work. And now your work tolerance is that much higher. You can apply yourself better. And the overall gain that you make by the end of that time is much greater than it would have been without.
Yeah, for sure. This is what I know it sounds really daft, right? But I've always kind of said, if you want to be a good bodybuilder, the majority of the good bodybuilders out there are strong bodybuilders. And if you can lift weights for reps, that's one thing. But if you can lift heavy weights for more reps, that's going to build more tissue.
Right.
So these people who I've seen, probably not recently, actually, because recently more of the higher volume approach has started to come back. It's come back in like this little bit of a wave, realistically, but maybe like 12 months to 18 months ago, or just pre-COVID, people were doing like a 3-rep max on a hammer incline machine press. Yeah. And it was like, why are we doing that? That literally makes no sense. You're going to tear some rotator cuffs. You're not going to get the stimulus that you want out of the actual press itself, because all you're doing is hitting neurological strength. Yep. And again, with powerlifting, it's exactly what you were saying. You cannot linearly increase all 3 lifts at the same time at the same rate. You have to be able to undulate, pushing your squat, then pushing your deadlift, then pushing your bench. I mean, I have done in the past for myself and for some other clients, I have pushed 2 movements up at the same time and just held one. And then obviously just undulated the things going up from there. But even in powerlifting, you've got to have some some higher rep stuff. Because you've got to be able to have that adaptation with the different muscle fibers in order to hit them. Because if you just hit the one type of muscle fiber, then you're only going to be able to hit that for so long, and you're not going to be able to progress that weight on the bar every single week on week out. So by having that undulation approach and by using different muscle fibers and different techniques, and even things, well, you know it yourself because you've been doing it, things like banded work and things like pause work and things like that, it's going to hit every single element of your muscle fiber as well as protect tendons and ligaments. So it works both ways, not just in bodybuilding, but in powerlifting and strongman as well. The amount of strong women and strong men that I get doing high rep clean log press, they hate me for it. But it's like, do you know what? It's cardio as well, but it's also getting you used to managing your aerobic capacity. That's something that I want to get into as well, aerobic capacity, because I think it's really important. The bodybuilders need to do it because they don't, because they're lazy. But yeah, it builds up aerobic capacity as well as obviously hitting all of those other muscle fibers rather than just doing a 1 rep max on a log, because that's hardcore, you know? Yeah. So viewpoints on aerobic capacity then. Sometimes with the low volume off-season bodybuilder work, you see a lot of guys and all they want to do is sit down all day. They don't do any cardio because it kills your gains, man, you know, and all of the rest of it. But then all of a sudden they can't do any more than 5 reps without being completely and utterly gassed out. Yeah. So what are your viewpoints on that, even in realms of a strength cycle?
I think we overestimate how much concurrent training has an interference effect.
Definitely. By
a long shot. So we expect that because we're trying to be in, and here's something else as far as bodybuilders are concerned, is we think with cardio, because of the way that we use it as a tool in a prep, it's energy expenditure. I don't want to be expending the food that I'm eating to try and grow right now. Like, what are you talking about, bro? Like, it doesn't make any bodybuilder sense. But cardio between a prep or a diet phase and you being in a surplus or trying to get your performance up, 2 different applications, because you're not trying to expend energy when you're in a surplus phase or trying to push performance. You're trying to use it to bolster your aerobic capacity. And that is a tool and it's an aspect, it's a latent ability that you need to keep intact, or else you are the dude that gets past 5 reps and it's cardio now.
Yeah.
Not a place to be. So if you don't have control over your aerobic capacity throughout that year, you're going to see, regardless of what your environment is, as far as all the things that help you to recover and perform and be ready for sessions, you're going to be kneecapped so hard and progressively harder over time as you spend longer and longer periods of time being away from having done any work for your aerobic capacity. It continues to dwindle. Yeah. Continues to dwindle. And then the work that we're doing in the gym, this is one I hear a lot too, is like, you don't really have to do all that much cardio because your weight training is cardio heavy enough. It's like, hold on.
Mm.
In this day and age, especially because we're not doing, you know, the old Arnold style workouts of being 3 hours of doing supersets and drop sets of everything just to do as much volume and get a pump. You're doing that. I mean, sure, I can see an argument for it because you're just moving so fast and the density of your work is so high that you can make a point that, yeah, your cardio is going to get stimulated enough that if you went to slower, more basic type training, you're going to have the cardiovascular adaptations to be able to withstand that without much issue.
Yeah.
But if you're not training like that, and you're training like the majority of us would, where you're doing not even just a top set down set method, but you're having a couple of straight sets, which is the basis of most training, a couple of straight sets, you have adequate rest between all of them to get to the next set and be able to do it fairly well, and repeat performance or improve performance, whichever. That is what we're doing is the base structure. Then you're going to take as long of a rest period as you feel you need to be able to get into the next set and do it well. Your aerobic capacity starts to already not be in a great place. That rest time is going to elongate itself every couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Because you need more of it, because you haven't trained your cardiovascular system and none of your training is actually stimulating you in a cardiovascularly heavy way.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens over the long haul on a year-long off season, coming from assuming came off of like a diet phase. I'll assume somebody came off of a prep.
Yeah.
Doing the most amount of cardiovascular work that you were going to do over the year, just finish that off. Following that, you just drop it out of the sky. Okay, not a great decision, but you did it. Dropped it all, your steps are down to nothing, cardio's down to nothing, and now you're training, but you're still feeling great.
Yeah.
And you're not stressing yourself because, hey, I don't have to do cardio anymore. Sick. Happy bodybuilder. No more sitting on the bike. Good. But over time, you don't have those adaptations hold on with that tight of a grip anymore. Your threshold for maintenance of any adaptation that our body creates is much lower than it is to gain it.
Yeah.
And so if you came off of just having the most cardiovascularly heavy work that you were going to do over the year, and then you walk into the next phase and you haven't done any of it, you're going to have a lag time that you're like, well, hell, I don't need it. I don't need the cardio work. Look at me. I'm doing great. Handling it. 1 minute rest periods. I can go do a set of 20 and not have a problem, be good. Wait a couple of months.
Yeah.
Food keeps going up. You're sitting around more because the food's going up. And when you eat a lot of food, you don't really want to move around that much.
Yeah.
You get more lethargic. Your sleep starts to change a little bit. You start getting more restful off the front end after the prep. And then eventually it starts going the opposite direction again.
Yeah.
Because your health starts to change a little bit and you start getting heavier, especially if you're a larger person already. Maybe sleep disturbances by sleep apnea and things like that start to take hold. In more extreme examples, those things all take away from your ability to perform as your cardiovascular capacity keeps dropping.
Yeah.
And what has to happen after that? Then you do end up having an interference effect when you start to bring it back in and your training performance does dip when you put in the cardio work because you had absolutely nothing to work with as a base adaptation once again.
Mm-hmm.
And then essentially the bodybuilder that was against cardio gets vindicated for his views against cardio.
Yeah. Vicious circle.
Yeah. Exactly.
What I also noticed as well is that when people come off prep and they're like, thank God I don't need to do any cardio anymore. And all of a sudden they don't do any cardio, their steps are down, their training capacity is obviously on a little bit of a lower end because they're coming out of that. So they're in a recovery phase and they're eating a lot more food. Guess what? They get real fat real quick.
Yes.
Their weight goes up a hell of a lot. And it's just like,
yes.
Holy shit, what the hell happened? It's all right, bruh. It's just water. It's like, no, that's fat. That's fat.
Yep.
So again, it's exactly the same thing that what we would do in terms of a prep. You wouldn't just all of a sudden kind of go, right, all of the cardio and no food.
Yes.
So why coming out of a prep would you go no cardio and more food?
Yeah. Or to be exact, none of the cardio, all of the food. Exactly.
That's exactly it. You know,
yeah.
It's exactly, and like all of the drugs, all of the food, no cardio. And it's just like, yeah, that fathoms disbelief.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's even the prep to off season. It's all of the drugs.
Yeah.
All of the drugs plus a little bit in the off season to make the rebound work.
Just to make the rebound work. Oh God. So I was talking to Luke about this, about rebounding, right? And I don't understand why people just all of a sudden go, right, I've come off the back of a prep, I can't wait to get on gear. It's like, why are we not just using food as the anabolic tool? Use that first, get a rebound from food, and then you can put in compounds and get a secondary rebound, because then you'll look and perform and feel like an immense panda rather than just like looking like one.
Yes,
which will happen if you do all of the food and all of the drugs.
Yes.
Immediately. You will look like a panda, so don't be a panda.
Yeah, being a panda is a rough place to come back from as well.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yes.
Unless you are like Po from Kung Fu Panda, because then he's the dragon warrior.
If you can work with it, you can work with it. I mean, he's a special example. I don't know if I would make that. That's got to be the exception to the rule rather than the rule here. So
being a dragon warrior, could you imagine? I could be a tiny titan and not a dragon warrior. Or I could be a dragon warrior and not the tiny titan. I don't know what I would like better, because I like pandas.
You got to make the choice, though.
It's that Goldman's dilemma again, right?
Yeah, you got to make the choice. Do you want to be the dragon warrior or do you want to be the titan?
I don't know. The Po was quite cool.
Yeah, but I think the coolness is short-lived.
I suppose
you get too used to it too quick. With the titan, you have the ability to grow as a larger and larger titan. Once you're the dragon warrior, you don't have much upward mobility there.
No.
You're kind of like stuck on the rung that you're left at as the dragon warrior.
Yeah, I suppose you couldn't actually go up. Yeah, where do you go from there?
Yeah,
that is very
we built
true.
in the next ladders for the titan now.
Yeah.
We already have the next steps already laid out.
That's it. We've got the logo. We've got the logo and the crossing off of the t-shirt. So
it sounds like we already made the decision yet.
I think so. God, we have some weird conversations. How did this turn into a conversation about pandas? Anyway, moving on from that cycle. Right, okay, so one other question about implementing a strength cycle as well as a hypertrophy phase. What is your opinion on, say, something along the lines of 2-a-day training, where you can have all of your strength movements in the beginning of the day, then have a little bit of a break period, and then do a secondary session where you do all of your hypertrophy movements?
I've tried it myself. I didn't find that it really gave me any further benefit than doing it all in one session.
Okay, fine, fair enough.
Yeah, and more than anything I found with it is that it made going back in for consecutive sessions harder and harder to do because of all the preparation that you need to go through to have an effective session each time. It takes so much more time out of your ability to train in with the double warming up and having to get through all of the work and showing up twice.
Yeah.
If you were just mentally the most solid person and just could not do anything, and if you were happy with doing absolutely nothing with your entire life but training, have at it.
Yeah.
You'll probably be all right. But you're also going to be working with such a reduced capacity for work in either session, especially the secondary one. It makes it really hard for you to continue to chase the hypertrophy goal effectively, as well as you chase the strength goal. Where not so much looking at it as an interference effect over the concurrent training style, but more so just the overall having to show up and do it all and have it be at high quality 2 sessions a day continuously. So I'm not super convinced that the practicality of it works all that well. With a great balance over just how much that you're actually doing in each session, you could pull it off.
Yeah.
You could pull it off. The way that I would feel about it is if you're purely a strength athlete, that approach might work. Because your emphasis is going to be very, very, very heavily on your strength-based session.
Yeah.
And then deprioritized, obviously, is going to be the accessory work that you do in the other session. And if you're looking at strength is the one thing I care about, and this accessory stuff is accessory stuff, and you treat it as a power lifter or a strength athlete that does accessory work to aid their powerlifting and their strength work, then looking at the accessory work that you're going to do through that lens, you're not really trying to chase a specific adaptation with those accessories anyway. Your effort towards them is going to be lesser. And you're not going to program them exactly the same way as you would if you're a hypertrophy based athlete.
Yeah.
So the difference being somebody that is a more hypertrophy based athlete that is doing that setup with strength in one session, hypertrophy in the other, you're going to be pushing at your maximum capacity on both.
Yeah.
Pretty much guaranteed. And then the hypertrophy session is going to be filled with movements that are going to be fairly analogous to the strength movement that was done in more isolated, externally stabilized ways that are going to be very, very high output heavy. They're going to be much less skill dominant type selections. Where, flip side, strength athlete making that same program setup is likely going to have chosen for them or chosen themselves those hypertrophy based movements are going to be more on the skill side of the skill to output spectrum of movement selections within the patterns. They're going to be more like Bulgarian split squats and the reverse hyper for a very specific parameter set, or things of the like that are going to be a little bit more geared towards specifically them doing that strength movement, the pattern that they're doing a little bit better, and not taxing their output capacity because that's going to take a chunk out of what they can do for their strength. Hypertrophy athletes are going to be looking at generally, what is the most I can do on all of this?
Yeah.
That's going to put a big hampering, no matter how much volume titration you do, you're going to be taking it quite a hampering on the strength-based work if that's the kind of paradigm you set up, because the hypertrophy goal is going to be at an equal importance to the strength goal. You do that, you're going to be fighting one down and one up.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
We've also got to assess that recovery time in between as well, in between each session, because quite honestly, for me personally, because I get up at 4:30, I could potentially do a strength-based session, say at 6 a.m. in the morning, right? Because if you're just going to do a strength-based session, which you're going to do heavy 3s to heavy 5s or something like that, it's not glycolytic. So you do not need a lot of glycogen going in at this point. Yeah. And a lot of powerlifters, when I actually look at their diet and I'm like, do you know what? Sorry, but we're going to take a lot of those carbs away because you're having a lot of negative weight going on here. They hate me for it. And they're just like, but I'm not going to have the energy to do it. It's like, well, you're not really using the glycolytic system. So let's just humor me for a week, and then all of a sudden it's like, shit, I can live more. So I could potentially do a heavy strength-based 3 to 5 rep range and just do the main big lifts at 6 a.m. in the morning. And then I would have a space between, let's say that takes, just your strength-based stuff, 90 minutes? Good rest period in between?
Yeah, I'd give it about,
Yeah, let's give it that. So that ends at 7:30. Then I would be able to have a really good recovery period and then possibly go in and do my secondary session about 4:30 in the evening, between 4:30 and 5. So I've got a really good chunk of time where I can refuel my system. Not that I would have depleted a lot of glycogen anyway, but I would have had a lot of rest and recovery and then gone back, had some more food, and then feed in the glycolytic system for all of my accessory weight, the 12, the 15s, the 20s. So feasibly that could work. I don't have time to do that. There's no way I'd be able to do it, but I'm just saying it as an example.
Yeah.
But for other people who don't get up at 4:30 in the morning and they just like to wake up with their natural circadian rhythm and they go and do their first session at 10, and then say, for example, they then need to go and pick the kids up from school, so then they have to actually go and do their secondary session at 3 o'clock. The time in between, you've got 3 hours to potentially recover?
Not nearly enough.
No way. And you've destroyed your CNS realistically. If you're doing heavy 3s, there's no way you're going to be able to go in and do 12, 15, 20s after that, after 3 hours.
Yep.
So from my personal perspective, I just don't think it's actually for the everyday person who does have a job, who doesn't get paid to be a bodybuilder or anything like that. I personally don't think it's going to be the best option.
Right.
Either. Good. I'm glad that we're on the same page with that one. That was another good conversation.
Yeah. And with that rest period during the day being something we're thinking about too, That's to the original point made as well, is that when you're stacking both of those and you're separating the sessions, your performance on either one is going to be more truncated by having them separated than having them stacked.
Sure.
Because of the fact that you already turned up, your nervous system has just so much amplitude that it can go up, come back down, and then go back up again.
Yeah.
There's only so much you can do. And then over time, if you just having to repeatedly press that up, you're going to take in much, much faster, much higher amounts of fatigue over a shorter period of time. So you have those heavy 3s, heavy 5s with that work that you're going to do for your strength-based stuff. I was going to do in the first session in the morning and do the hypertrophy later. If you just stacked them together, made somewhat of a concession on whichever one is going to be the higher priority as your target, make that a higher priority within the session, allocate more time and more working volume to it, deprioritize the other by a little bit, and then you can have both of them and the performance all around is going to be better.
Yeah, for sure.
In most cases. And then you're going to be able to fully prepare yourself for that one session as well. You're not making any sort of like daily schedule shifts that are going to make it not that great for you, like waking up at 10, having the first session, and then doing the next one at 3:30 or 4. That's not going to work out very well.
No.
You have them all together, you have one opportunity to turn it all up and get it all done with. You're going to be able to perform for that one time, turn yourself up mentally for that one time pretty easily. If you're in a normal state and you're not already burned out, it's going to work out all around better, and it'll make it easier for you to have a real understanding of how much total work you can truly tolerate.
Exactly.
And it's not going to just hit you out of nowhere that like, oh, this is too much.
Yeah.
Because you could feasibly, with a split type of sessions off the day, you could have a couple of days of like, wow, I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing pretty good. And then just wham. It's like,
yeah,
holy cow, I can't do anything now. My triple, like my weight on my triples has like dropped by like 30%. I can barely move it. And then I do my hypertrophy work and I just don't have the click.
Yeah.
Like, that happened like that because you were doing those sessions and pushing up your amplitude of stress so high, so much. You only had so many times you had the ability to do that for.
Yeah.
Your recovery of what time you had between that session and the next one, and then that session to the next one over the next day, wasn't nearly enough for you to start pushing the dirt back into the hole you were digging over the day before.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then over time, you're the guy sitting in the hole with the shovel, and you're just like, you're just getting there. You're just trying, and you're digging, and the dirt's just falling back on your head. You're like, oh no, it's not working. And then you just end up sitting in the bottom of the hole with nowhere to go.
Yeah, exactly. And this brings us a whole 360 to the beginning of the podcast where we were just literally talking about your stress levels. There is only so far you can push.
Yeah.
And until your body just kind of goes, no, do you know what? Fuck off.
Yep.
And it breaks. And I think bodybuilders forget that. And I think pro bodybuilders forget that the most because they just think it's fine. I'll just add another compound. It's fine. I'll just do a little bit more. I feel like shit. It's okay. I'll just do a bit more. And they're even worse when it comes to their clients. This is actually a conversation that I had this afternoon with a very good friend of mine. And he is not doing well. He is like 9 days out. He's blown up with an eye infection that's just come out of nowhere. His gut isn't working properly. His water retention is all around his lower back. He looks terrible. He can't think straight. His neurological focus, even his boss at work was like, would you go home because you are literally losing me money because you are too slow in terms of productivity. So this is 9 days out. He tells his coach just goes, okay, sorry you feel like poop. This is now what we're going to do. More cardio, less food. Do you know? And I looked at it and I was like, wow, well, that's shit. So yeah, I mean, we had a coffee actually beforehand before I went and got the kids from school. And it was just like, you cannot do that. Your body it's just not going to respond to that because your cortisol levels are already so high. And now you want to push it even higher.
Yeah. If you've already fallen off the cliff, you don't keep pushing.
No, there's nowhere to push.
Yeah, there's just, oh man, I feel for the guy. That sucks.
Oh, it sucks bad. It sucks big style, you know.
Wow.
But and again, these are the decisions that people make, and they're just like, it's fine, I'll just keep pushing, I'll keep pushing. And it's just like, well, do you know what, one of the things that I live by in life, and I will send you this t-shirt, I promise I will send you this t-shirt after we do this call. I'm going to get your address and send it to you. The quote that I live by in life is, just don't be an arsehole. And it suits every realm of life. If you know that something is going wrong and you just think, maybe I should just do that, is that an arsehole thing to do? If it is, just don't do it. Just don't do it. It's the same thing like going, you're tailgating somebody and you're like, I can just overtake it before this tractor comes and hits me in the other direction. If you do that, you are being an arsehole. So just don't be an arsehole. You know, and it does work very well. So this is what I'm going to send you, Nick. If you're not watching this via YouTube, then you're missing out. That's a logbook.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I know, and it's a training log, and I know that you should log all of your sessions, and it says just don't be an arsehole on it. So every time that you write down something and you think, I'm going to put one more plate on, even though my hip really hurts, you're going to look at that and you're going to actually, hang on. Vic says don't be an arsehole. Maybe I won't do it.
I might have to just always have the page I'm writing on as the front and never close it.
Yeah.
So I can get away with the making the asshole decisions.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't worry. I've got t-shirts on it that say don't be an arsehole as well. So
wonderful. I'm waiting on it then. That'll be great.
Oh dear. Right, I have taken up enough of your time. You have finished your water, so I know that I'm going to that's it. That's how we know the podcast is over. So I'm going to love you and leave you guys. As per always, I will put Nick's details underneath the podcast in the YouTube comments. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, let us know if you have any other questions, or we'll do a Q&A on these kind of things. You know that I love doing Q&As. Obviously, if Nick enjoys these as well, I'm just like saying, yeah, you're coming on all the time, because why not?
I'm good with that. It's not a problem.
Exactly. You know, we talk about pandas. It's so much fun. Anyway, right. Thank you once again, Nick, for being part. I will catch you guys on the next episode of Don't Fear the Wait.